All right. Welcome to the Lovecraft Easing podcast, guys. Um, I, I'm recording this on Easter Sunday, so usually there's a gang of us as listeners and viewers of this podcast know, but today it's just me and my guest, Ness Brown. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks for being here. Matt Carpenter said he was going to be here, but who knows? We decided to just plunge ahead, and when he gets here, he gets here. If he gets here. You guys know how Matt is. So anyway, I'm Mike Davis, Lovecraft Easing podcast, and Lovecraft Easing is a micro press and do quite a few other things. And my guest, as I said, is Ness Brown, and they are an astronomer. You're studying to be, or is this accurate, to be an astrophysicist?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. You taught astronomy for quite a while, if I have
hmm
this right.
hmm
And you just wrote a book called The Scourge Between Stars, so which I loved.
Oh,
So
thank you so much.
this is your debut novel, right? Yeah,
Yes, that's it.
there's Matt. Um, I'm going to, usually Matt has a prize. It's something he kindly does for me every show. Hey, Matt,
Hi there. Sorry I'm a little late.
you're
We do have
you're all
a
right.
prize,
Actually, they gave me 2 copies of Ness's book.
right?
Let's use that today, and then we can use your prize next week, if that's all right.
Sure. We will just collect entries as usual. Send an email to easingprizes@gmail.com. And what's the title of the book?
The Scourge
So put
Between
Scourge in the
Stars.
subject heading. All right. So
Yeah,
Scourge in the subject heading. Send an email to easingprizes@gmail.com and we'll draw a winner in about 6 weeks.
and I have the book here, so whenever Matt picks a winner, a random winner, he'll tell me, and I'll mail it out. So yeah, that's the best prize to give out today. Ness, this is my friend Matthew Carpenter and co-panelist
Hi
Matt
there.
Nice to meet you.
Ness Brown. Matt, you want to introduce yourself real quick? We were about to get started. I guess he's not. Now he's freezing on me. Oh, Matt. So this is your debut novel.
hmm
Oh, there you are. You froze. We'll assume everyone knows who you are. Okay. Um, this is your debut novel, The Scourge Between Stars.
That's
Um,
correct.
all right. Well, I said that you're an astronomer. You're studying to be an astrophysicist. Now you're a novelist. Um, can you tell the audience a bit more about yourself, and then let's talk about your book?
Absolutely. So I am originally from New Mexico, which I think it's fair to say is a land with a pretty long history of speculative storytelling. Um, one of our kind of claims to fame is, of course, the Roswell incident. So, kind of from a young age, I've been exposed to the idea of, just encounters with the unknown, stories involving things a little bit beyond our understanding. And that certainly shaped, I think, my mindset growing up and my interest growing up. So I came to New York City to study astronomy. After graduation, I taught astronomy and astrobiology for about 6 years. And one of the courses that I taught was specifically about life in the universe. And it was such a fun time. We spent a whole semester talking about habitability beyond Earth, interstellar travel, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. It was a fantastic time. And I actually used quite a lot of the material that I presented to my students in The Scourge Between Stars, my debut sci-fi horror novella. So all of my interests are kind of based around space and storytelling, and I'm so glad that I got to tie those together in Scourge.
Yeah, you can certainly see that. I don't want to give too much away, but in the threat that they are fighting,
Mm,
there's some interesting characteristics that it has, one of which I had never thought about before when thinking about alien life. So do you think the Roswell incident, where whatever it was or was not, but growing up in that area shaped, your desire to be an astronomer, wondering about what's out there and so forth?
I think it's a little bit funny that, unlike maybe a lot of my peers, although I was interested in those sort of events and those sort of stories, I didn't actually decide to pursue astronomy until about halfway through my undergraduate career. So in a lot of ways, I may have been a bit behind some of my peers, some of my colleagues today. But really the sparking event for me was I was, gifted enough to go on a conservation trip to Costa Rica in high school. And that was my first time ever seeing the stars without major light pollution, just
Oh,
like a
yes.
crystal clear view of the sky. And that created such a sense memory for me that when I got to college and was really struggling to decide my major, that image kind of popped back up in my mind. And on a whim, I took a kind of introductory astronomy class, and I never looked back from there.
I love that because it is so, I think a lot of people today don't realize what a moving image that is, because there's so much light pollution everywhere,
Yeah,
even in small towns. It's hard to get anywhere where there's absolutely no light pollution, where you can gaze up there and see those stars.
absolutely.
Uh, Excuse me, a little throat problem going on to the audience. So if you um, see me pause or cough, I'm sorry. That's why. Um, the I remember the first time it happened to me. I was probably 19, and I went out to a friend's house, and he lived on a farm with his mom and his dad and his sister. And I got out there, and it was really in the middle of nowhere. There was a lot of farms these days that aren't in the middle of nowhere, but this one really was. And I got out there, I turned off my car, I turned off the car lights, and I could not see my hand in front of my face. It was absolutely so different. It's such a culture shock. And then I looked up, and I've always been interested in astronomy ever since I was 5 or 6.
Mm,
But yeah, you're right. It does create that sense memory. It's very, very moving,
for
you
sure.
know, and to see the line of the Milky Way, you know, that we're out on the edge of. So
Right. So moving.
it is. Um, so would you tell the audience, tell us about your book, maybe avoid as many spoilers as you can, but tell us what the plot synopsis is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Scourge Between Stars follows acting captain Jacqueline Albright on the starship Calypso as its crew is fleeing from a failed exoplanetary colony on the exoplanet Proxima b. So kind of unlike some other science fiction stories, right from the get-go, we see that humanity has failed to expand further in the galaxy and is attempting to make its way back to its ancestral home on Earth, which, we don't necessarily know the condition of or what sort of welcome they'll receive when they return. However, this journey is being complicated by the fact that the ship is low on resources and there is an unknown threat periodically attacking the ship as they move through interstellar space. And all of these conditions are creating unrest on the ship, and kind of splitting the crew into factions. And our acting captain, Jacqueline, is struggling to essentially hold the ship together with prayers and duct tape when we enter the story. And as she is attempting to put out all these figurative fires on board, a new threat emerges. And we start to see crew members being picked off one by one in very bloody and gruesome ways. So it is up to Jacqueline, her kind of almost assistant, an android named Watson, and her team to figure out what exactly is hunting them in the walls of their own ship.
Even before that happens, it's very gloomy because as Jacqueline keeps thinking to herself, the math just doesn't work. No matter, because there's about 6,000 people on the ship, and the math just doesn't work for there to be enough food and resources, and perhaps even air to make it back to Earth.
That's correct.
And they're limping along. They're not going at the speed that several hundred years before, I guess, they were able to when they went to Proxima B. So, Centauri, isn't that a triple star system? Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I remembered that correctly. So tell us about Proxima B, your hypothetical, your planet in this universe. Circling one of those stars, but I forget. Well, Bree, obviously.
So I'm so glad you asked that because throwing in little kind of quick fleeting descriptions of Proxima B was one of my favorite parts of writing this novella, because I tried to keep my descriptions of this world as faithful to the data that we've been able to recover about this exoplanet thus far. So the very closest star system to our own is the system called Alpha Centauri, which, as you already said, is actually made up of 3 stars, the smallest and closest of which is Proxima Centauri. And the first planet that we found in orbit around this dwarf star is Proxima B itself. Now, like many other dwarf stars out there, the Proxima Centauri star is, I would say, it throws a lot of tantrums, so to speak. It undergoes these fairly regular magnetic flares, which send quite a lot of radiation, high-speed particles toward the exoplanet itself. And we believe that Proxima B may actually be tidally locked.
I was going to ask about that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah, that was one of my questions, because you never say that in the book, but you do talk about living on the Terminator, and I thought there's only one way there's a Terminator, So, which maybe explain what a Terminator is and then go on. I apologize for interrupting.
No problem at all.
It's just exciting,
I feel the same way. It's so cool. Unlike what we're familiar with here on Earth, where we experience regular days, our planet rotates so that every part of it at some point faces our star. Proxima B is tidally locked, which means that it orbits in such a way that only one side of the planet ever looks at the star. The other side is submerged in complete darkness. And when we think of habitability on a world that has one side of permanent day, one side of permanent night, we typically refer to the region called the Terminator, which is kind of a place in perpetual twilight, kind of a permanent sunrise or sunset situation where we think, rather than being too hot or too cold for life to exist, it may be possible to kind of eke out a living at that point. So yes, I do quickly mention it. I'm so glad you brought it up, but this failed colony that the crew of the Calypso are fleeing from, it did exist on the Terminator of that world, in that little strip where life could possibly survive.
Is that our data that we have here in whatever real life, that there's a Proxima B and it's tidally locked?
To my understanding, yes. We know that Proxima B.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. We know it's out there. I believe it completes an orbit every 11 days. So it's whipping around its star. And typically in those conditions, around such a small star, typically those planets are tidally locked.
Are the other 2 stars in the triple star system, I guess they're far enough away where they wouldn't affect life on the planet?
That's a great question. My tentative understanding, and I am by no means an expert in the system, my tentative understanding is that Proxima b is so close to its own star that I think it's the dominating effector of conditions on that world.
Right.
But I would actually love to, sit down and kind of look a little more about whether the other two stars are influential as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much we can know here on Earth, but it's interesting, and um, would that, I don't know, what effect would that have, if any? In the book, it doesn't have any, but who knows what it really has.
Mhm.
And for those who don't know, Alpha Centauri is the closest star system. I love that the colonists, they're literally the closest star system from the sun.
Mhm.
This was as realistic as possible from my limited understanding of what could possibly happen in the future. One version of our future. It's 4.5 light years away, but we can't travel anywhere near light speed. How long did
Correct.
it take the original colonists to get to Proxima b in your book?
The original colonists, I believe they took about half a century to make it over there. And those numbers are actually based off of, the tentative calculations of the Project Orion, which was, to my understanding, like an abandoned project from last century, where scientists were investigating rocket designs to take us to the nearest star system within a human lifetime. So I wanted to kind of pay homage to those ideas from last century. And, that's under the assumption that humanity in kind of anywhere near the future is able to come up with a fusion rocket design, which is much more powerful than the chemical rockets that are in use today. But as we kind of have alluded to, while on the very hostile surface of Proxima b, the colonists' technology, their spaceships are corroded by these intense conditions. And so when they do try to make it back to Earth, they find that their whole systems are kind of thrown out of whack. And that's another element that's really complicating the way home.
And the dedication that would have to take, knowing that you're not going back to Earth for you necessarily, but maybe for your great grandkids or great great grandkids to give them a chance.
Absolutely.
It's a depressing situation when you think about it, but it's just, humans doing whatever they can do to survive and make sure that their children and their children's children just survive.
Mm-hmm.
So in the midst of all this kind of hopelessness, with the resources dwindling and so forth, then we've got this intruder. And I really love the way that you introduced it, as, this unknown. You kept it unknown for a long time in the book as far as getting a clear picture of what it was. And, so when Jacqueline hears this bang next to her in the walls, it's very frightening. And I remember one scene where she hears these bangs. I think she's in the observation deck and the lights have gone off because they're only on for so long unless you move, your arm or start walking or something. And she does that. Correct me if I'm remembering this wrong, but she does that and the lights do not go back on.
Mm-hmm.
And, this just chill goes through her. And then she's hearing these unknown bangs in the walls. And so it's very well done. I loved it.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Um, there's also definitely some cosmic horror in this book. Just a dash, I would say, maybe more, depending on your interpretation. Is cosmic horror something that interests you?
I would say yes. I think there's a lot of space horror that I just enjoy and I like being scared by and I like delving into. Um, the highest levels, I think, I guess what we would call cosmic horror, I would say that actually maybe really scares me. So I don't always seek it
Yes.
out because it can get, you know, thinking about, I don't know, the maybe even say the hostility of the universe on levels so far out of our control or maybe even understanding. To me, that's the most frightening, because I think that could really be real. There are so many things
Yes.
we've uncovered about the universe so far, so many mysteries that people are working hard to kind of unravel today. But I think there's stuff out there that we haven't even begun to conceptualize. I think it's fair to say that stuff is out there.
Okay, so I want to go in a little bit different direction, because this is like you've got some expertise here about the reality of what space travel might consist of. Because my understanding, I was in the Air Force for a while, I'm in radiation oncology, is like there are all these ionized iron atoms just zipping through space that can't be shielded, like slowly making Swiss cheese of your DNA or your brain.
Mm.
And, even a 2-week trip to the moon and then being on the moon without atmosphere is a significant exposure. Now we're talking about sending a crew to Mars, where realistically, if it ever happens in my lifetime, it'll be a journey of probably about 18 months, several months for travel. You've got to time it just so everything's right for the return, assuming everything else goes well. Realistically, where do you see space travel is going with this problem? Because if you can't shield the iron atoms, then humanity can't live off this planet. See, so it's like really our concerns about the cosmos are more of like interest than practicality, because we're never going to go there. Do you know what I mean? We're more interested in like keeping this planet livable, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there an answer to that question? Matt's brought this up before.
Oh, well, I hesitate to say that I have a good answer, because once again, I'm definitely no expert in space flight, but I love that you brought up the innate danger of simply being exposed to the void of space, these cosmic rays that are pinging around that we don't have great shielding for. It's something that is even a concern to the people up on the ISS currently. So as you mentioned, the long flight time that we would have to deal with going to Mars, coming back, and then I love that you talked about the window in which we kind of have to wait for the planets to align again to keep these journeys as kind of minimized as possible. All of it, it's so difficult to address with our current level of technology. And that's part of what motivated me to kind of make the story of Scourge start out with human failure, because I think there's so much about even just going to the closest objects to us in our solar system that are dangerous and that are prone to failure, let alone something like trying to move anywhere throughout the galaxy. So certainly I am not aware of what tech we're trying to use to combat radiation dangers or particle dangers, but the fact that they exist, I think, makes significant space flight probably something we're not going to get to for a while.
Now, did you ever see the movie Europa Report?
I was about to bring it up.
I did.
We all liked that because it showed, one reason we all liked it is it showed I don't know if hostile for something that has no intelligence is a good, inimical, space is inimical to human life. And I thought that movie did a good job of showing that.
And the just utter how long it takes to get somewhere, dealing with the boredom on the way there, all the things that can go wrong. Philip Gillott, who directed that, is actually, folks that are listening, one of my patrons. So yeah, be cool like Philip. Join the Patreon. I think Europa Report's an excellent example of that.
Yeah, I actually, while I was teaching, I would recommend the film to my students as kind of
Awesome.
like an extra credit assignment, because what I wanted them first was to take note of, again, what we're talking about now, the inherent danger of spaceflight, but also to I don't know if I don't want to spoil anything for someone who hasn't seen the film, but to take note of the depiction of what could be lying in wait on, a Jovian moon like Europa, which is actually the Jovian moons of our system. These are some of the places we're most excited about in the field of astrobiology as places where we could possibly find the very first detection of life beyond Earth. So I think Europa Report does something very interesting with that hope that we have for those worlds.
Yeah, I think that if you're not familiar with astronomy, a common question is, what about life on other planets? Yeah, that's true. Not so much in our solar system, but perhaps in the moons of our solar system. So, which I don't know why, that just excites the hell out of me. I think that's great. Getting back to what you were saying about cosmic horror, the thing that I've said this several times, not that I think that Cthulhu is lying in wait somewhere, or Azathoth, but the fact of cosmic horror, that it could be possibly realistic, is because of Fermi's paradox is a great example, which one of the things that it says is that there are a lot of stars in our galaxy and in other galaxies that are far older than the sun. So therefore their planets must be far older than the Earth and the planets in our solar system. So if intelligent life did evolve, it could have evolved a hell of a long time ago. So, Fermi, he was like, so if that's truth, if that's true, and it is, if intelligent life did evolve, then where are they? So it was kind of a stumper. You could probably do a better job than me of explaining Fermi's paradox. Can you tell the audience what that is?
Oh, I thought what you just said is a totally fine introduction to the question, the unanswered question so far of, if life does exist out there, why haven't we met it yet? And traditionally, there are three solutions to the Fermi paradox. One of which is that we are baseline alone.
Right.
We are alone. There is nobody else out there. And that could be for various reasons. It could be because the universe does not, on average, support the conditions for life to evolve, and we're a fluke, which I personally think is a really depressing answer. And I don't necessarily know that it is aligned with some of the data that we are recovering about these new worlds that we discover on a much more
So
frequent
I
basis.
actually heard some speculation that life was actually a way of transmitting energy down into entropy. It was sort of like like you think of like a mitochondrial cascade of electron transport, but it's like the one thing that supported life was it was a way that kind of developed to convert one form of energy back down into entropy. It's like I don't have the tools or the knowledge in this area, but it was striking to me that this suggested that it isn't all that surprising, say, that life evolved. But on the other hand, just because you evolved on a planet doesn't mean you can live on it. The environment's going to change, and a lot of species have ended because their niche was gone.
Very true. But if that is true, and the universe is amicable to life starting, then there are so many stars and so many planets out there in the universe that, yeah, there are going to be many, many false starts, and many, many where maybe life evolves, but intelligent life never evolves. So I noticed in several places on your website, in your book, in your about me in the end, encourage your students to wonder who else might be out there in the universe. And you say that several times in several different places that I can tell it's a passion of yours. What are some of your thoughts? Is one of the answers to Fermi's paradox that, yeah, maybe there's plenty of life out there, but intelligent life is a hell of a fluke, let's say?
Absolutely. I was actually going to say that you, in fact, brought up another, sub-solution to the paradox, which is that, maybe life isn't all that odd But the goal of evolution is not necessarily intelligence. There are plenty of species that thrive here on Earth that do not prioritize any kind of development of higher sentience or,
Exactly.
complex problem solving, pattern recognition, anything that I guess we would associate with intelligence. And then I think maybe one of my favorite solutions to the Fermi paradox is the idea that there is life and there is intelligent life out there in pretty substantial numbers. But maybe perhaps they have hidden themselves. Maybe they understand that either the timing for introductions is not right with our world now, or maybe they don't necessarily see any utility with making themselves visible, observable to our kind. I really, really, really like exploring, and I really, really, really like asking others to explore and hearing their ideas about, just all of these possibilities. Because I think what the Fermi paradox does, while we don't have any real answers to it, is it encourages some much needed self-reflection about our civilization, how we interact with our world, what expectations we have for other worlds, and how maybe those are not quite in alignment with each other, and what we can do to make it make sense, make our behavior on Earth make sense, and maybe eventually make our interactions with other worlds hopefully be intelligent and not necessarily exploitative, for example.
Well, if I were an alien life form, I think I would look at this race and think, yeah, let's wait a couple more thousand years. Maybe they'll grow up and stop being so warlike and such idiots, or the version of what you're saying is the Star Trek prime directive.
Absolutely.
It's more likely they're not like the Vulcans and all that.
No, I know
superior.
that. I'm not saying that they are.
It's like
I'm just saying the prime directive
sort of probably blindly groping their way into everything like we are.
Well, if they are, and they've been around a long time, they're perhaps past that blindly groping stage. They didn't evolve at the same time we did.
Yeah, but
They might have evolved 3 million years ago to.
Sure, but then I get back into the fact that, like, I just think the distances in space are so unimaginably vast. The time scale is so unimaginably different. And the difficulty of interstellar radiation is so impossible. I just don't see how anybody gets off their world. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like these ideas of these secret flying saucers flying around.
Well, I think what you said just now is exactly the thing. You don't see how it's possible.
Right.
Maybe if you've evolved another 3 or 4 million years.
No, I saw the same thing last week, and I've evolved since then.
But I think the point is, Matt, is as Ness is saying, the point is to think about these things, not whether or not they're realistic or not, but think about the possibilities. So
I like science.
So you were saying, Ness, self-reflection and so forth.
Yeah, I think well, one thing that was just brought to my mind as we were kind of going through this discussion is at the end of every semester of my course, I would show my students the movie Contact, 1997, Jodie Foster, Matthew McConaughey.
Love that movie.
Yeah. It's so great. And one of the things that I really loved, I do love the book and the movie, so I don't have beef with the adaptation, because I think it's doing something slightly different than Carl Sagan's original work. But one thing that I really love about that premise is that, there is kind of this almost exam that humanity passes, and so that's when we get inducted into the broader galactic community. And I really love this idea that when you kind of evolve past your baser selves as a civilization, then you're fit to join a community even greater than what you knew on your own world. I love the idea of community at the highest level. But what we find
really does explore that. You're right.
Yeah. And I love the way it's handled. And I love how even when humanity is kind of inducted into this more universal society, it's to kind of join this problem solving effort, because even, you know, these higher beings, they're working on something. They're trying to unravel an even higher mystery in the cosmos. And they said, all right, let's work together on this. And I truly
Is
love
that,
that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is that in the book? So not so much in the movie? I'm trying to
Yeah,
remember the book.
to my recollection, I mean, many things are different in the book.
Yeah.
A team are invited to go through the wormhole, not just Ellie Arroway herself, but to my recollection, I believe there is a mega structure that was left behind by a prior hyper advanced society.
Yeah,
And
that
I
was the
think,
wormhole system that they showed in the movie, but in the movie they essentially said they didn't know who made it.
yeah,
Right, right,
yeah.
right. He
So,
says we didn't build it. It was there when we got here,
mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
which I love. Look, she's talking to such an amazingly advanced alien or aliens, and yet they're saying somebody way more advanced than we did. We are built this.
Yes. I love that. I love the
I do
idea
too.
that curiosity goes on, you know?
Yeah. And one of the things that many things in the movie have stuck with me over the years, but when he says, and all the, all the emptiness, something to the effect of the only thing that we have found to, messing up this quote horribly, that is each other,
Yeah.
the companionship of each other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I very much, discussing possibilities, I very much like that idea as well, Ness. So, it appeals to the optimist in me, as opposed to the the pessimist, or even maybe the realist that you know life in the universe doesn't care about you because you're an ant as far as they're concerned.
I
So I love the contact version.
I also would characterize myself as a optimist in this realm, which is maybe why I decided to do a pessimistic take with the Scourge Between Stars, simply
Yeah.
because that's what we dream of. I love that Star Trek brand of, you know, this is what we're capable of when we come together as a universal society. But I definitely, as someone who knows a little bit more about the difficulties that lie in our way, I did want to acknowledge them.
Yeah.
What we have to get through before that's possible.
I mean, obviously I love cosmic horror. That's one of the themes, but yeah, I love thinking about the optimistic possibilities as well. So anyway, getting back to your book, um, it just came out on the 5th, is that right?
That was Tuesday the 4th.
Tuesday the 4th, right? So it's available now. It's available in print and Kindle. Is there an audiobook version? I didn't.
There is an audio
Oh,
version.
nice.
I
That's
believe
great.
it's narrated by Bonnie Turpin.
Yeah.
So she's amazing. She's fantastic. And even though I'm not really an audiobook person myself, I love her take. I love how that came out. So any version that people would like to grab for themselves, anything, every version I think came out great.
Sometimes an audiobook, I love reading, but I also love audiobooks.
Mm.
And it's not a question of either or for me. But I have noticed that especially in suspense and horror, an audiobook can sometimes perhaps scare you or creep you out more than the reading of it. You can't skip ahead. And
Mm.
you're sort of right there, even more so than reading.
Mhm.
But yeah. Well, that's great. I'm glad there's an audiobook version. I've got a couple of questions about the book that are hopefully as spoiler free as possible. Well, first of all, I really liked, and I don't have the Kindle version, so I don't know if there was a way to do this on the Kindle, but in one part of the book, when they're searching for the intruder, slash intruders. It it says it opened to pitch darkness, and then that whole page is black with white text, and I'm like, wow, that's cool.
Yes. Oh, I had no idea that our typesetter was going to pull that together. So the first time I ever held a copy and I was flipping through and kind of rereading just to take in, the
Of
fact that
course,
it was physical, as real as in my hands. I got to that page and I lost my mind. I was so excited.
that's great. Um, can you sort of, I asked you if you had a drawing in an email, but can you sort of describe the ship, the Calypso?
Mhm.
What would it look like? What does it look like?
So uh, also something that I mentioned in our correspondence, but the Calypso itself is actually, its design was sort of cobbled together from a couple different places when I was setting out and putting the ship together. One of which was some of the ideas that came out of the Project Orion schematics for a fusion rocket. And then the others are, very much influenced by many of the ships that, I grew up with or have encountered in sci-fi media. But in essence, the ship is sort of, oh, you can almost think of it as like a cruise ship sandwich between what we call uh oh gosh, now I've just forgot the term, but like a particle plate,
Mm,
and then or a particle shield, excuse me, and then like a pusher plate. And the idea is that we need a kind of barge-like ship to host as many people as we're talking about here. So maybe not as luxurious as a cruise ship, but something that can pack in certainly that kind of population. We have our radiation shield or particle shield out front to kind of provide a defense to something that we've mentioned a bit earlier in our discussion, which is the fact that there are ambient particles spread throughout space. And the faster that you travel, the more danger that those stray particles, the more dangerous they become, because now they can start kind of punching holes in your vessel. And that's the last thing you want out in space.
right.
And then something that's mentioned a couple times in the novella is the pusher plate, which is essentially the part of the ship that should make it possible to go, significant percentages the speed of light. Um, the idea is that when you jump, as is called in the novel, when you make, or excuse me, when you start achieving speeds that are significant fractions the speed of light, the pusher plate is designed to protect the rest of the ship from that kind of acceleration. And this is all sci-fi tech. I couldn't
Right,
possibly
of course.
explain, how we're supposed to build this ourselves, but that's essentially the Calypso, the most important parts. So I like to think of it as kind of a long barrel of a ship, and we have these lifts or these elevators that can take you to various departments or the wards, the living quarters of the ship. And I really, really like the idea of having quote unquote elevators, because as many tight and closed, confined spaces, I wanted to make, excuse me, as many tight and enclosed spaces as I could on the ship, because I think that always just makes the discomfort level
Oh, of course.
rise higher.
Um, there's a robot in the book called Watson. Um, I wanted to ask. Now there's a lot of AI in the news lately,
Mm.
here on Earth, and I wanted to ask: is Watson self-aware, or is Watson an AI in the sense of the AIs that we're typing at these days? Because
Now,
it seems almost self-aware and emotional in some areas. And I knew that it is science fiction, you know, but I also could tell that you were trying to, stick to reality within the realm of science fiction, and at least provide a reasonable framework where how whatever it could be possible. So that's
mhm,
why I wanted to ask you that.
yeah. First, I must make an obligatory disclaimer that these like chat GPTs, for example, these AI services, I'm really unfamiliar with, the stuff under the hood.
Yeah.
So I certainly can't say exactly how far away these recent advances are from a machine like this fictional Watson. But this concept of a machine being able to take in vast amounts of input and kind of spool out appropriate responses, or responses that really resemble, products we would expect from people, from actual humans. That's really what I wanted for Watson. When we kind of come into the story, Watson has just been given an upgrade by its owner, which was supposed to make it so that Watson could handle essentially taking in the entire starship's kind of streaming data at once, and from it do data analysis and try to find patterns in what the ship's receivers were picking up. But what I kind of wanted to show throughout the story is that at a certain point, I think there's a crossover between, I guess a mechanical input output and what we humans are actually doing, which is responding to stimuli, and then of course, reacting in ways that kind of depend on, exactly what's going on up top. And I wanted Watson to kind of be the closest thing that our society has kind of seen to the natural human process, at least, as far as the society in the book has come.
You start thinking about this sort of thing, and it brings up the question of free will, at least for me. Are we an advanced version of doing the same thing? Which is depressing to think about, So if you want to be even more depressed, then, conspiracy against the human race is always available. Yeah. I mean, the AI that I've been playing around with, I mean, it says it's not self-aware, but it says some amazingly human-like things. But I'm not fooled for a second into thinking that it's self-aware and it's doing this on its own. It's just, this is one of many possible, as you said, it can take in vast amounts of data. I think I heard, I'm going to get this quote wrong, but computers are incredibly dumb things that can process a lot faster than we can. And so they, and one way to look at it is potentially it makes a million mistakes, but spits out the one response that's not a mistake, or one of the responses that's not a mistake, So anyway, I wanted to ask you about Watson, especially in light of everybody's talking about AI these days. So,
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
In fact, Ness and Matt and I, we actually decided to take the day off, and these are our AI life models doing this interview. So,
If I had any idea, it could do a lot better than this.
Really? You think so, huh?
It's like you say, if this is a simulation, I got to have words with the programmer. They've fucked up big time.
That's too funny.
So here's some comments from some other writers and reviewers. Gemma Files, who's been on the show a few times, the Scourge Between Stars crosses the expanse with Pandorium by way of event horizons and emerges darkly victorious. Ada Hoffman says, a tense, pulse-pounding adventure. Ness Brown deftly steers this to a surprising and all too human conclusion, wrestling a glimmer of hope out of the Calypso crew's despair. And Allie Wilkes, who we had, author of All the White Spaces, had on last year, I think it was, when her book came out, says compulsively readable and packed with both creepiness and outright scares. Yeah, and this is one of those books that is very easy to devour in one or two sittings, because you just want to keep reading. So, and it's not Stephen King length of a book either. So you can actually do that. So again, it's The Scourge Between Stars, available in print, Kindle, and as Ness said, in audiobook format as well. So who are some of what have you been reading lately, and who are some of your favorite writers, whether they're contemporary or past writers? And what are some favorites that you've read lately?
Yeah, I definitely want to shout out a couple authors whose books I read that immediately made me want to go out and get some more of their work. I think oh god, I can't remember what the publishing date was, but a little bit before Scourge was, of course, S.A. Barnes' Dead Silence, which is another space horror, which I found also very compulsively readable. I've heard it described as essentially like a haunted Titanic adrift in space. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, essentially this luxury space cruise liner was, I think, decades ago, kind of lost at the edge of the solar system. And, no one knew what had happened to it or where it had disappeared to. And then a kind of salvage crew working deep into the solar system picks up a signal and essentially rediscovers the wreckage, and are hired to go and retrieve, some of the, I guess, valuables that are said to be on board, because it was attended by kind of the who's who of the day.
Right.
And as you can imagine, as soon as they set foot on the ship, things go terribly wrong. So
I love the premise. Yeah,
I know
I'll
it
have to
was
check that
so
out.
fun. I thought, I thought it had a main character who deeply flawed, but you're not, you still want to follow, you still want to go along with, which is hard,
Right.
very hard to pull off.
It is. Yeah. It really is.
Mhm. I also was thinking about Caitlin Starling, who the first book I read from Caitlin Starling was The Luminous Dead, which I also thought had a super, not fun, this is obviously, everyone has a very bad time, but a super fun premise where it takes place on an exoplanet, but it's essentially a story about spelunking. A caver is hired by a very mysterious employer to essentially go into a cave and retrieve, some unspecified, I guess, assets from the employer. But as this mission, this cave diving mission goes on, lots and lots of things start to go wrong, and our protagonist begins to learn quite a bit more about the individual that hired her for the job. And it's very, very tense. I almost think cave stuff is worse than
Oh,
being
yeah.
stuck on a spaceship. Oh,
Well,
that
what's
one.
the what was the title and author on this one again? I missed it. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, it's The Luminous Dead
Okay.
by Caitlin Starling.
Caitlin
I really
Starling.
enjoy it.
That's right.
Yeah. And both of those authors have new things coming out as well that I absolutely can't wait for.
Yeah, caves. I've seen The Descent once. It was a great movie that I will never watch again. You know,
Yeah, I do know. Hmm.
I'm right there with you on the caves.
Uh-huh.
So,
Oh, and I did want to shout out one more author, kind of different from the space horror that I've mentioned before, but this is Kirsten Hall. I would categorize her work as more fantasy horror, or fantasy with these really fantastic horror elements to it. And I'm a huge sucker for fantasy woven through with horror threads. I remember, like many people, a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, diehard fan. And one of the things I love and continue to really enjoy about those movies is how, in the midst of this incredible high epic fantasy journey, we get these totally horrifying moments where it seems ripped almost from a totally different story, like when we enter the mines of Moria and terrible things happen, or the kind of walk through Shelob's lair
right.
later down in the series. And I think Kirsten Hall kind of really captures these like horrific moments that are set in these new but incredibly rich worlds. So specifically her novella, The Border Keeper, I 100% recommend.
I'll check that out. What were some influences on you growing up as far as books and authors?
Mm. Well, specifically in the realm of horror, I would say I watched quite a bit more horror than I read. Um, but when I did read horror, probably the most classic horror influence was Edgar Allan Poe. And, you know, like many people, I just was really taken in by these short but incredibly dense, horrifying premises. My, I think, favorite story from him is The Black Cat. I love all the visuals. I love how grody and gruesome and almost vengeful that story is. So that definitely, I think, had an impact on me. The idea of evoking strong reactions in kind of just a few carefully chosen words, although by no means have I honed my craft to, you know, that level.
I mean, I agree. I reread Poe to this day.
Yeah,
You know, I was
it's
going
so
through the
good.
House of Usher again the other day, and I was just marveling at the prose.
Hmm.
You know.
Um, and a book that still stands out in my memory is Prey by Michael Crichton.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think I was in maybe middle school when I read it, or I was certainly quite a bit younger.
Was that about
And
the nanoparticles?
yes, yes, absolutely, the nanoswarm, the nanobot swarm. And you know, I don't typically read techno thriller, I guess you could call it that, but I remember like my heart pounding a lot when I was reading that book. And I think what really influenced me was how Crichton is able to develop this sense of urgency and imminent danger in the story. That is another thing I would love to kind of improve about myself as a creator, just being able to kind of keep you enthralled and really feeling the danger to yourself. Although you could always close the book and walk off, you know?
Well, yeah, but you know, I mean this when I say it. You really did a good job of that in Scourge Between Stars. You know, the intruders, and as they're, you're right there with them, and there's a lot of fear that the protagonists feel, and horror that they, and terror that they feel, that you're feeling right along with them. You know, so I thought you did a great job with it.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
So you watched a lot of horror movies growing up too. What are some of your favorites?
I have to say, sci-fi horror movies, my bread and butter. I love them. I love them especially if they're quote unquote bad, or if they didn't get, you know, you know, a critical.
Pete should be here, Matt.
So, Doom, Pitch Black, loved that kind of stuff growing up.
Oh, Pitch
Signs, I
Black
saw
is
that
great.
way too young. Yeah, Pitch Black, I love. You know, the rest of the series did not get as much love. I still stuck with it. I love that world and
You
anything like
mentioned
that.
Signs. I've said this on the show before, but you know, for example, here's a great just here's a great example of using the unknown to evoke terror. When Mel Gibson's out in the field and he's out there in the dark with just a flashlight and he's yelling, you know, you're not gonna get famous doing these crop circles, get out of here. And then in he's in between the rows of corn, and then you just see this foot that is out in the, yeah, see, Mickey Shiver just thinking about it. You see this weird looking foot, and then it just goes back into the corn, and that's all you
Mhm.
see, and you're like, what the fuck?
Oh yes.
And so is Mel Gibson.
Yes. I love that you mentioned that and how just the sparing, just so judicious placements of what little you can see. It makes the moment where you finally, I guess, get your first real glimpse of what they're up against. It makes it so. I still remember being like I had a visceral reaction to the first true kind of sighting of the alien, or one of the
Oh
aliens.
yeah, when he's when he's when he's in the closet watching
Oh God, the
the
closet.
footage,
Oh yes. Oh.
and then Joaquin Phoenix is just like, oh, and he's like goes
Mhm,
backwards when he sees
mhm.
it. Uh,
That was me too.
plus, it's just so hilarious that that moment has been memed so many times. You know, so yeah, um, yeah. Do you like Event Horizon? Is that one of
Oh yeah,
yeah?
absolutely. I saw it also young, I think. Um, and it's funny, I saw that young, but I saw Alien, which I think is probably the strongest inspiration for Scourge. I saw that quite a bit later. Um, so it's really interesting how they kind of came together, and certainly formed a lot of what I wanted from the atmosphere of Scourge. But I have to say, um, some really strong influences, or not necessarily films. Um, well, certainly Doom, the film Doom, but also video games.
Oh, sure.
I love to play video games, and I couldn't possibly talk about Scourge without talking about Dead Space,
Oh yeah.
which is still, I know the remake is coming out soon, but the original is still fully playable. It's fully impactful. I don't think it has really aged, a day. So I love that.
Um, I was actually going to bring up excuse me, three Lovecraftian or cosmic horror video games that are coming out or have just come out.
Mm,
One's called Dreams in the Witch House, which is sort of a point and click on Steam.
mhm.
Um, Another one that's getting really rave reviews, and they gave me a Steam code, and I'm really looking forward to playing it, is called Dredge. In every review I've ever read, it's this sort of fishing game that,
Mm.
you know what? If I describe it, everyone's going to be like, "Wow, that sounds really stupid." Let me read it on Steam here. Let's see. Bloody Disgusting says 5 out of 5, one of the most exciting indie titles in years. Um, about this game, captain your fishing trawler to explore a collection of remote isles and their surrounding depths to see what lies below. Sell your catch to the locals and complete quests to learn more about each area's troubled past. Outfit your boat with better equipment to trawl deep sea trenches and navigate to far off lands, but keep an eye on the time. You might not like what finds you in the dark. And I read one review that said basically you're playing this really relaxing fishing game, and then all of a sudden it gets dark and it turns into a horror game.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that sounds amazing. And I
Yeah.
know it's going to scare me because I think I'm sorry, I think the ocean or the sea
Oh
is so
yeah.
much worse than space.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then the last one that I wanted to let everybody know about, since you brought up games, is Sherlock Holmes: The Awakened. I guess they redid it and it's about to come out. And
Mm,
it's Sherlock Holmes. Uh, Cthulhu is involved, Matt. So I watched the trailer today. It actually looks really good. So I don't remember when it comes out, but just sometime soon. Yeah, horror and video games. Yeah, very legit influence.
mhm, mhm.
So,
Thank you for bringing those up, by the way. I've been looking for something new to play.
oh sure.
We've talked on this show before about how ever since there's been humanity, there's been ways to tell stories.
Yes.
We've just all sort of, when we were much younger, when I was much younger, it was all books, magazines, TV, radio, the theater. But video games have come such a long way that now it's like, why isn't a video game as legitimate a means as telling a story as any other? It's
Mhm.
just a different sort of experience, perhaps a little more visceral.
Yeah. Because you are the protagonist.
Yeah, the
And
participatory. Oh, sorry.
no, you're fine. I was just gonna say, I would like someday. I'm not a big video gamer. I do play games though, like Dredge and so forth sometimes, but I would love the experience of this so much. playing horror video games in VR. Can you imagine how scary that might be, Ness?
Uh,
Oh my gosh.
yes. Oh man.
Because it'd be like you're right there.
Yeah, that's exactly exactly what I was going to say. The participatory element of gaming, I think, just horror with that, such a match made in heaven.
Yes. Well, I think that's all the questions I had for you. I wanted to say that when Tor contacted me about your book and about you, I get contacted a lot about books, and first of all, the book looked really interesting. But the other half of the reason why I wanted to read the book and talk with you is because you're an astronomer and you're studying to be an astrophysicist. And I just thought this is going to be just so neat because even though it's just, I'm just a layman as far as this goes, I have a deep interest in the topic and I have since I was a little boy. So,
Yeah.
so no more teaching astronomy right now. You're going to school for astrophysics.
I am. I am a part of a science storytellers program, however, which is essentially based in Queens. We are servicing the children at the Boys and Girls Variety Club of Queens and giving them cultural astronomy outreach in preparation for this planetarium that I believe is going to be built in Queens in like 2026 or something like that.
Mhm.
So I can't leave astronomy education alone. I fully intend to go back to it when school is done because I love having conversations like the one that we have today. I really liked so many of the topics that both of you brought up, which I think, more people would be so interested in hearing about and delving into. And I think many people don't get the opportunity necessarily to, wonder in their everyday lives about kind of what's going on
So
far
what
above
are you
us.
writing anything now?
I am.
Are you allowed to share it with us? We won't tell anybody.
Well,
Right.
right. I am working on another space horror, among other projects, but this one is actually following, how should I say this? Where Scourge, we kind of get evicted from, the other worlds that humanity is attempting to expand onto. In this new space horror, we see that humanity has fairly successfully colonized a increasing region of the galaxy. And they have a system where they send kind of pioneering scouts ahead to set up the framework of new colonies, which are followed then by more intense, I guess, construction crews and colonization efforts. So this new space horror kind of follows what happens when one of these pioneering groups fails to make contact with kind of the rest of humanity back on Earth, and a exploratory crew is sent out to find out what befell them, only to kind of make it down onto the exoplanet itself and receive a very hostile welcome from the native flora of that world. So
That sounds great. I take it that in their previous efforts, humanity, the worlds that they colonize, there isn't anyone there as far as intelligent life.
so far, yeah,
So far.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I was just gonna say, did you read the Martian Chronicles?
I did.
Yeah, it
I
reminds me
did.
of that. I love that book.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Martian Chronicles. And there's another book I was gonna bring up that's a influence. It slipped my mind now, but I guess the final thing that I'll say about my new project is that if anyone is into fungal horror, which is kind of the new craze right now, justly
Oh,
so.
we talk about fungal horror a lot. We can tell you movies, books. You got it.
Yeah, then hopefully you'll be able to look forward to maybe this next project coming out in the near future.
Are you familiar with Sylvia Moreno Garcia?
Yes.
Okay, so when she was running Innsmouth Free Press, so this is like a decade ago, she accumulated an anthology called Fungi. And it's just basically a collection of stories about fungal horror. And there's also there are references to, like, she accumulated a list of movies and books and things like that. I think it's included. I think it's still in print, or you can get a copy pretty easy.
Oh, thank you so much for that. I'm going to go devour that.
What you were saying about giving people the opportunity to wonder about these ideas. I remember in the introduction to Demon Haunted World, Carl Sagan talks about going to the library and asking the librarian for a book about stars, and the librarian directed him to the the movie section, Hollywood stars and everything. It's like, no, that's not what I want. But his point in the introduction was that his teachers at school made all this stuff seem so dry and boring, when actually it's so wonderful to talk about. It's so wonderful to think about, once you get past the I'm just doing this to pass the test. But when you get past that and into the ideas of it, so yeah, I love talking about this stuff as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, so again, it's called The Scourge Between Stars. They sent me 2 copies, so that'll be our prize for today. easyprizes@gmail.com. Just send a email and put Scourge in the title. Matt and I have a few more things to talk about, but it's up to you if you want to stay and listen to us drone on. But I just wanted to say, if not, thank you for being here. I really love the book, and I hope everybody listening will pick up a copy and read it. So
yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was so great to talk about all my passions in one place.
Yeah, it was really great talking with you. I'll just say, I don't want to, Paul Tremblay is one, he wears his influences on his sleeve, and I don't want to speak for him or paraphrase him badly, but, he just, for example, a Head Full of Ghosts, he just dives right in and says, yeah, I was influenced by this and that and this and that. And to say that you were influenced by Alien, and I'm sure many other things in writing the book, I will just say, with all of that in mind, that if you're a fan of Alien, and who isn't, you'll really like The Scourge Between Stars. So, and we haven't even delved into the fact that there are some other entities that come into play, that when the book starts, the ship is getting knocked about every once in a while, and they develop this theory that perhaps these huge cosmic entities, correct me if I'm explaining this wrong, are perhaps battling, and they're just caught in the middle and not even being noticed. So yeah, there are a few more ideas in the book, but if you than Alien, but if you liked Alien, you'll love this book. So pick it up, guys. So
thank you so much.
Thanks for being here, and I'll send you links when everything's available so that you can share it if you want. So
much appreciated.
Thanks.
Good luck
Nice
in
to
your
meet you.
future writing.
Thank you so much. So nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Hopefully.
Bye.
Have a good one.
You too. So guys, I'm rereading The Fisherman by John Langan, and
You're hooked, right?
good one. Dad joke. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm just struck again by how well written this book is, and how poignant it is. It's a really great cosmic horror book. If you haven't read it, you definitely should.
It's a wonderful novel. I think one of the top cosmic horror novels. I'm interested that you decided to reread it, because I've been contemplating picking it up again. I've got so much new to read, and yet it's been tickling the back of my mind, I guess, kind of like you. one thing I really like about John Langan's prose, and I'm not being at all critical. It's like he doesn't hurry.
Yes,
The
I
characters
admire
have
that so
time
much
to
about him.
breathe, to live, to become alive. And then the other thing is they come alive on the page because they feel so human. He writes really believable characters that you can relate to. So that when the world starts getting weird or goes to hell, you can feel for them a lot more.
Yeah, I very rarely compare anyone in any way to Stephen King, just because everybody does it. If you like Stephen King, you'll love this. Well, who doesn't like, at least some of Stephen King? But I will make this one-time comparison that rereading The Fisherman, I'm reminded of Stephen King's Duma Key and From a Buick 8, where these stories, I've said this before, they could have been told in 3/4 or half the amount of prose, but I'm glad that they were not. And I'll say the same thing of The Fisherman. It could be a shorter book, but I'm very, very glad it's not. To your point, Matt, that he takes his time with it, and the payoff, it's that much richer of a payoff, and it's that much richer of a reading experience.
And one other thing that he does often in his longer works is nested stories.
Yes.
So this is a story within a story within a story, and yet you don't lose the thread of any of them. They're all moving along, and you're involved in all of them. And then they all tie together at the end, and it's actually pretty heartbreaking, like a
Yeah.
lot of Langan's best stuff.
Yeah.
Damn it, Langan, write a comedy.
I don't know. I don't want him to write a comedy.
It's so beautiful to say, wow, what a great book, but also I'm sad.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see what else we can talk about. I wanted to read a couple comments. I'm not going to read them all, so I don't want to bore you guys. I am deeply, deeply grateful for this group and the guests you have. When I listen and watch, I feel like after a lifetime of being a square peg in a round world, I finally found my peer group. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Another commenter says, I love these people. It's honestly like hanging out with a close group of friends. I asked Kelly if he'd give me a nice comment, Kelly Young, and he did. It was so great of him.
Really?
Yeah, I posted it in the show notes. I like to listen to this show when I'm having trouble sleeping. 4 minutes of Mike Davis droning on, and I'm out like a light. Kelly Young.
Oh, thanks, Kelly. Didn't mention me.
It's so sweet, isn't it? Yeah, very sweet. I haven't had a chance to watch The Doom That Came to Gotham. I'm waiting until I can. I'm hoping for HBO Max. I don't want to pay $15 to buy it.
Yeah, I would like it once it starts streaming. I'm going to show it on the movie night. Because I think
I've heard nothing but good about
you
it.
heard. I think you might have been the one who told me about the comic book more than 10 years ago. I think.
Yeah, I did.
And it is just very well plotted, interesting. So I've been waiting to watch it myself. Instead, this weekend we went to the D&D movie. Have you been to that yet?
Mm-mm.
If I know it's a drag to go to the theater, but this one it was worth it to see it on the big screen. It was very charming in a lot of ways. It was like a real D&D campaign in that there's serious bits, but there's also a lot of humor, and it moves along. It doesn't really. It's like I thought the beginning was just a hair slow, but that was fine. I really enjoyed the whole thing. I was absorbed throughout. Good action, good performances, funny script. It could make a sequel or it couldn't. It could be a completely perfectly good standalone movie.
You mentioned on the show, excuse me, not on the show, on the Facebook group that Joseph Wurzos, am I saying his name, has died.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something about him?
I don't know if the younger viewers would have heard his name at all, but it seemed to me that like in the 70s and 80s, his name came up a lot. And in the 90s, he was like at the tail end of the pulp magazines. So like I think in the 60s or maybe the late 50s, he edited Fantastic and might have been Amazing Stories. So he edited a couple pulp magazines. He wasn't a big author himself, except some nonfiction essays. And then a lot of his association with the Lovecraft Circle was he served as a very important copy editor for Arkham House. And then for a long time, he was serving the same function at Centipede Press. So he's one of those people who had a hand in a lot of everything that built up this community. But it'd be kind of like, here's the guy who compiled the books. He didn't write the stories. Do you know what I mean? So maybe his name isn't going to be as in the forefront, but he was really important to the evolution of our current weird fiction community. The best way he wrote the introduction to that wonderful compilation of Durless stories, a beautiful book called In Lovecraft's Shadow. And then you probably, if you don't have a copy, the art book, A Lovecraft Retrospective from Centipede Press, like 2009, incomparable, one-of-a-kind book. He wrote the discussion of Henry O. Morris. So he was involved in this book. So we just...
Yeah, Lovecraftian retrospective.
Yeah, so when someone from the Lovecraft Circle dies, we just try to mention it on the Ezine Facebook page. Joseph Orzo's probably influenced some of the things that you read, even if you didn't know his name.
Good friend of mine sent me this copy here.
Oh, wonderful book. There's nothing like it. It's like one of my favorite books in my collection.
In your collection? You sent it to me. No, you didn't. I think Seth Bradley did. I'm sorry. I have such a terrible memory for who sends me stuff. I need to write myself notes. But yeah, it was Seth, I think, and it's a very nice gift because the book's worth like $1,000. You know, even used, I see it on Amazon at $958.
Yep, Centipede Press, they do a limited run, and then when they're gone, they're gone.
Yeah.
Right now,
Supply and
they are
demand.
selling a collection of art by Alan Kozowski, another old-timey Lovecraftian artist. And it's a really lovely book if you could get a copy. They had a few still left for sale at Centipede Press. It's not even horrifically expensive, although it is a little bit pricey.
Like what, $50?
Yeah, $50, $60, $70, something like that. So not terrible, just not trivial.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Rick is slowly getting better. As a matter of fact, he sent an email saying I was shocked that he could make it today. And I've sent him the link 3 times as we were talking, but as you can see, he's not here, so maybe he got fatigued.
We'll just keep looking forward to his return.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't want him to rush things, but I'm very much encouraged by the fact that he said he wanted to come on today. So I'm going to call him tomorrow and check in with him. Laird is also improving slowly but surely. He's put on a lot of weight since
he has.
January.
That's good.
Yeah.
So is he back home and filling his oats a little bit?
Oh yeah, he's been back home for a while, and he's back on a routine and getting some writing done. And I don't want to speak for him, but yeah, he is progressing for sure.
You know, even those of us who are just sort of friendly with him rather than his friends just wish him well.
Oh, absolutely.
So that he could get better and maybe go back to enjoying his walks around upstate New York and stuff.
Well, I told him the best thanks that he could give to people who helped him with the GoFundMe with bills and so forth is the reason why they did that is because they care about him, number one, but number two, they do want to see more Laird Barron fiction for the next 20, 30 some odd years. They want more Laird Barron books,
right?
So
But you know, if Laird decides he never wants to pick up a pen again, you know, we'll just be happy if he's healthy.
Oh, absolutely.
No.
But yeah, that's not Laird. He's already writing. Um, I emailed Paul Tremblay about Knock at the Cabin and the Cabin at the End of the World, and I said, you know, I don't think I've seen anyone really touch on this in a review or interview or anything, but you know, in both the movie and the book, it's assumed that God is doing this if this is indeed happening. And, you know, wow, what a dick. You know, in the book, they ask the David Bautista character what kind of God would do this, and he says the one we have. In the movie, that question never gets asked. But you know, I thought, who says that God's doing this? You know, maybe it's an alien entity, you know, that's pretending. Maybe it's if you're into Christian mythology, maybe it's the devil. You know, the scriptures refer to Lucifer as the god of this world. And it's just something fun to think about. And he said something interesting. He said that when they were doing the screenwriting for the film, it was suggested that maybe, you know, suggest that this is the devil and not God doing this, because, you know, they didn't want God being the bad guy, but that didn't go anywhere apparently. So it's kind of fun to think about.
It's
Just
now streaming, I believe, on the Peacock
yes, on
platform.
Peacock. Yeah.
So I'm probably going to offer it up as a movie night choice coming up.
Yeah.
I've not
I'm
seen
very
it.
happy for Paul that this was made into a mainstream movie. Very happy. That said, in my opinion, the book is way better and more nuanced.
Well, come on, man. It's like M. Night Shyamalan caught lightning with his first movie.
Right.
It's like an absolute masterpiece, The Sixth Sense. And since then, let's just say he may not have completely lived up to his earlier promise.
Maybe not.
But still, it's like we showed the movie They Remain, which is based on the Laird Barron story 30. And I was really glad to see Laird Barron get a movie made of his work. And it's a pretty good movie. You know, you think about the budget, the scripting and everything, but it's still not going to be a smash blockbuster where you think, okay, he's going to get more movie deals out of this. You know, it was very much an independent movie. This is a more mainstream movie for Paul Tremblay. And so even if it's not quite a match, you know, that happens all the time in
Oh, it
movies.
does. Absolutely.
But maybe they're going to take a look at like that, what is it, Disappearance at Devil's Rock? That would make a good movie.
Oh, I think so.
So he might get some more contact from.
You know what? I think, and I've said this a million times, but Disappearance at Devil's Rock is my favorite Paul Tremblay book. I've told him that, and I think it would make a really good one season Netflix or Amazon series.
An 8 episode kind of
Yeah.
like. Did you
I
see
don't think you could do it justice in a movie. I think a miniseries could really get it done right.
Did you see Mayor of Eastwick?
No. What's that?
Okay, it was a fairly popular detective police show. It was like 6 or 8 episodes, and it was like maybe 2 years ago or something that it came out. It was quite popular, although I have so much heartburn with how they did it. Well, I do. There's some genetics in it that just fuck up. It just drives me nuts. But never mind. Anyway,
How can you tell?
I could tell you in detail what I thought was wrong with that show.
That's okay.
That's what I thought. So, but my thought is, okay, a 6 to 8 episode was plenty of space to tell a story, develop the characters, slowly work up tension so that it's like really intense by you get to the end. I think that would really work for Paul Tremblay because that's exactly how he writes.
Yeah. It'd be
It just
great for
becomes, by the end, it's
disappearance.
just about unbearable, to read
Yeah.
because it's so tense.
So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. My thoughts on that.
Do we know of any other of our friends who are working on cinema stuff or are working on an adaptation?
Not that I know of. I wish somebody would do a miniseries of The Fisherman.
Boy, I have a harder time with that. I almost think I was thinking a movie might work better with that one,
You think so?
but you have to have a really good script.
Well, you know,
And I think, oh gosh, those detective stories by Laird Barron, those would be perfect movies.
they would
Man,
be.
they read so cinematically. So I guess I could call up my movie director friends.
Well, I think
I
Laird
am
and
I am related to John Carpenter. It's just
I think
he's not the director. He's my brother, and he sits on his ass in Cincinnati, so that might not help much.
great. Does he watch the show?
No,
Listen to the show?
no.
I think John and Laird and a lot of other writers that we know are just sort of, as far as cinematically, they're successful writers, but they're perhaps waiting for their cinematic moment, and then there'll be a quote unquote overnight success, you know. So, but yeah. So last Monday, I was woken up at 8:30 in the morning. I was up late, so I hadn't actually slept for very long. I'm used to pain for the last 15 years, but it felt like my throat was on fire. Like, I'd put something flammable on my throat and thrown a match down there. In addition to that, I mean, it was really, really something else. And like I said, and I'm used to pain. And the other thing is I couldn't hardly breathe or speak. Started drinking water. That didn't help. Long story short, I spent most of the day at the ER with Danielle and Logan, and they did a CT scan and found a 4 centimeter mass on my thyroid. So, first time I heard 4 centimeters, I'm like, no, that's not good. And then I actually picture it. I'm like, well, it's what, almost 2 inches, something like that. That's
Inch
pretty
and a
big.
half, yeah.
Yeah, it's 4 centimeters. I got out a ruler and I'm like, holy shit. I haven't had too much of the burning since then. Had a lot of coughing, and for several years now, it's been very hard to swallow at times. Every time I eat, I have to have a drink at my elbow. I have to take a drink every couple of mouthfuls, otherwise I would choke. And I'm not being dramatic when I say that. But it's just been, there's so many things wrong with me that I'm like, okay, I got to put this on the back burner. And apparently it can't be on the back burner anymore. So I wanted to let all the listeners know that. I know I did talk about this on Twitter, so some of you already know. They don't know what it is. Danielle said, you can't help your mind going there. Could it be cancer? Yes, it could also not be cancer. So what we're waiting for is that the ER doctor was adamant, and I mean adamant, that I get in to see an ENT right away. Unfortunately, bureaucracy and life got in the way, because my wife got right on it when we got home, and only Friday did we get a referral. Finally went through from our GP to the ENT. So we haven't even been able to book an appointment. Now,
Is
of
the
course,
EET local to
yeah. Well,
so
he's in one of the next towns over.
okay.
So of course, ironically, when we got the referral, it was Good Friday. And he'll probably be closed on Monday too. So hopefully Tuesday we can at least book an appointment so that we can get this looked at and find out what it is. I don't know. It's been a tough week. I guess that's all I have to say about it. So my mind's gone to some pretty dark places too. Anyway, that's what's going on, but I'm trying not to let the podcast suffer. So I wanted to do one today. And for the Patreons, I do have 2 Patreon podcasts coming up this week. Recording them. I'll probably release one this week and one next week. So one's a deep background with Langan of all people. Everybody likes that deep background series. And then the other one is an interview with the director of They Wait in the Dark, which, if you haven't seen it, is a really good movie, horror movie. I think you have to rent it right now, at least. But it's still got 100% Rotten Tomatoes rating, if that means anything.
But we also have another one, isn't it? The Patreon movie come Wednesday. The
Oh, yes, we do. Thank you for the reminder. We're doing a Mystery Science Theater 3000 type thing. And we're going to watch Cocaine Bear. And so we're going to, we meaning the usual crew here at Lovecraft Zine, and we're going to do our commentary on it. And then we'll release that.
Usually those Mystery Science Theater 3000 type shows, they're for bad movies.
I know.
Here you have a piece of cinematic.
You guys wanted to see it.
But we are going to, just do our best to try and find something to ridicule.
Yeah.
It'll probably be.
I'm sure we'll think of some funny things to say.
Right.
Anyway, then I'll release that recording to the Patreons, and you can line it up to start the movie exactly when we do, so that you can watch it and listen to our commentary. So something fun. It's just something fun, something extra for the Patreons. Something fun. And speaking of Patreon, I hate to say this. I'm not trying to use what's going on as, give me money, but I'm sure I got some medical bills coming up more than usual. If you're not a Patreon, I mean, really, there really is so much to enjoy on the Patreon. And even starting at the beginning level of $5 a month. And I mean, really, there are some of us for whom this is not true, but I think most of us who can't afford $5 a month. So I'd appreciate the support. Just go to patreon.com/LovecraftZine or Google Lovecraft Zine Patreon. And I think that's, excuse me, all I have for today. I don't want to wear my voice out too much. Anything else, Matt?
No, just every week, if this is your first time, we will mention some book or movie that's just coming out. We'll also get back around, circle back around to your old favorites. So just keep tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remember, there is a prize. It is the book. What is it? The Scourge of Space? No, the
Scourge Between Stars.
Yep,
by Ness Brown.
Ness Brown, she was our guest today. So if you want to win a copy of that, send an email to easyandprizes@gmail.com and put Scourge in the subject heading. You'll get an extra entry if you're one of the people who spells Scourge correctly.
And I think properly saying it, they were our guests today. So just want to point that out. But yeah, be a good price. And it's a great book. So pick it up, folks. Thanks to everybody for listening. And for the patrons out there especially, thank you for keeping the Zine lights on. And we'll see everybody next week.